Our next speakers will share how technology and other innovations are transforming the Canadian agriculture sector. Felix Weber is president of Ag Business and Crop Incorporated, as well as founder and vice president of Cardo Canada. He has been involved with GIS and geomatics in agriculture and other industries for years. Felix was recently named the first recipient of the Builders Award at the Precision Ag Eastern Conference. Jennifer Christie is program development manager at Catapult Grey Bruce. She has more than a decade of experience in agri-marketing and nonprofit leadership at John Deere and 4-H Canada. Felix, Jennifer, over to you.
Awesome. Thanks so much for the introduction. I'm going to share my screen here very quickly. It's a pleasure to be here this morning with everybody to talk a little bit about agriculture and technology and what's happening today. As Dr. Mira said, I did grow up in the agriculture industry. My family has a dairy and grain farm just west of Owen Sound in Bruce County. And after working at John Deere for 10 years, I transitioned into nonprofit management. So I'm also the founder of the Agriculture Women's Network. It's a network for women farmers and women that work in the agriculture industry in Ontario. And I work with businesses in Grey and Bruce counties to help grow and expand their business through Catapult Grey Bruce. So at the other end of the value chain, my partner and I also actually own a restaurant in Paisley, Ontario. So I've certainly got a pretty good understanding today all the way from farm to table. As Dr. Miria said, today joining me is Felix Weber, the founder of Ag Business and Crop Incorporated. Felix, can you share a little bit about your business and how you ended up in the agriculture industry?
Well, thanks a lot, Jennifer. First of all, I'll probably start up a little bit of background. I grew up as a farm boy close to a city in Switzerland and came to Canada, started to farm and started to use some of the technology like record keeping, right down to the cent, knowing what I'm doing on the farm and have a history, using yield monitors in early 1990s and started to sample based on zones on the farm, growing the farm that way, getting into consulting and being interested to help my farmers. So how we're using the technology today, it was always my dream when I have a private pilot license flying over the fields to see what's happening in the field. And you can't really see it real good in the image there on the PowerPoint, but you can see some discoloring in the fields. And how can I map this out and do something with it to do better? What's missing in the crop and how can I help that crop? So that's what got me into this business. In 2010, I got into drones. At that point, it was more like an RC plane with a camera. At least that was their idea. I looked at satellite imageries to find out if that might help me, but because of weather conditions and so on, that just didn't help. And cloud cover and timing and so on didn't work. So I thought, in consulting, I'm going to use the tools for my clients, but realized there might be more behind it. So today's business is we're applying and supporting, servicing drones and automated soil samplers. Because to me, the soil sampling is the basis of the information that I was just talking about, to know what the crop is getting. And during the crop year, it helps me to look at those areas, how they change, or where there's something missing when I walk the field. So basically having the boots in the field hasn't changed. We're still doing that. It's just more or less, I know where to go. I know how big that area is, and is it worthwhile doing something, and analyze with tissue tests and soil samples what's going on.
That's great, Felix. We're going to talk a little bit more about that and how we can apply the boots on the ground and the knowledge in the field with the technology. I'm going to share a little bit about how we've used technology on my family's farm. So certainly some of the technology on the livestock side in agriculture has been around for decades. So you see this cute little baby calf and her RFID tag. These tags have been used in the industry for decades, and they help us be able to trace an animal right from the time she's born all the way through her life. And that's one example, but more recently, we're seeing a lot more use of robotics on farm. And in 2014, my family actually put their first robots in. So the one down here on the left is a feed pushing robot. It makes sure that our cows have feed in front of them all of the time. And then this is is our milking robot, and you can see how it works here in the video. So it's using machine learning, it's using automation, a lot of technology that is currently used throughout manufacturing being used on our farm to allow our cows to be milked whenever they want to be milked. And what that means for my family is they also have more data available to them than they've ever had before. So this dashboard here shows you what is happening at that robot, either at the click of a button on the screen or through a smartphone app that my brother has access to. He can see which cows are going to the robot, how many times a day they've gone, how much milk they're giving. It also measures things like the cow's body weight and the conductivity in the milk so that it can flag things that might not be normal. Over time, the robot gets to know, what does Lily cow, for example, what does she weigh? How much milk does she typically give? And if at any point one of those data points doesn't line up, it can send a flag then to my brother. So he knows, hey, you need to go check on this cow because she might not be feeling great. That's an example on our farm. And Felix, your work, you talked about drones and taking the drones and the information and going back to the field with that. Can you share a little bit more about how that works and how the farmers you're working with are using this technology today, and what's the benefit to them?
Okay, good questions. Thank you. The first part is you see a little image there of what my thinking is behind the whole crop planning. And so using any technology at this stage, it can be overwhelming to one part, but if you're using it correctly, I think it can give you a huge amount of information. As you said before, like on your dairy farm, you got the health of their animals. The data can help you with that and how much they eat, etc. In the field, when I know what the soil has and nutrients available to the plant, that doesn't necessarily mean the plant is getting that. It could be that there's too much phosphate being tied up by other nutrients because they're interacting. It's like when you take a vitamin, right? Magnesium might be not effective if you take another vitamin at the same time. So same in the field. And what we're doing then with the drone is looking at what's actually happening during the cropping season itself. Is what we're doing reacting, or is there certain areas that I really need attention? I'll go into the field, take a tissue sample, just like you take a blood sample, and analyze that. Does it have enough nutrients in it? Is this the normal level? And if it's not, we may apply a little bit. So going through the field with a sprayer today doesn't mean you're actually applying crop protection. You may actually use nutrients to help that crop along, because there is micronutrients that are very, very, very little amounts used in the plant, and using that through a sprayer helps it to be available, taking it up through the leaves. So how it works with the drones or with satellite images. So what we're measuring is an index of how much light is reflected by the plant, because the sunlight is food to the plant. And what we're measuring is, did that plant not take it up? So I'll give you an example. There's certain nutrients in the field that might be too much in the soil or being tied up. The plant isn't getting it, and as you see the map there. So for me to know, I'm thinking, okay, I got a good soil sample, it's going to work. And it reflects. So if you have a big plate of spaghetti in front of you, and you're in a big room with a lot of people, you're probably not as hungry. You're being distracted. If you have a little plate in front of you, you're eating a lot, and you're finishing that plate. So if I have too much, the plant can't take it up. It reflects light. So the sunlight is food for the plant. It changes into chlorophyll, sugar into the plant, and that will show up in an image like this. And I'll go to certain areas in the field and check. So if I can go to the center of that red area and look at the center of the yellow area, that gives me a tremendous comparison of what's going on. There could be other factors that affect this, But that's why you go and analyze that. It could be a fungus, it could be insects, it could be anything.
So what you're saying here in this picture, Felix, for those who aren't familiar with this is a picture that you've taken from a drone overlooking a field. And so these different colors are different sections of the field. And as you're saying, the plants in section A here are doing a good job getting the nutrients. And so they're reflecting more light back.
Actually, it's the opposite way.
Is it the opposite?
Yeah, the red is generally speaking, in this case, is generally speaking not as good. Now, you got to watch. We're using different filters, and that's what this picture kind of shows. This is an NDVI, and that's why the A and the C are more red. If I use a red edge NDVI, which is a much smaller spectrum of light in the red, it's more the chlorophyll. And that's where it becomes tricky. Which tool are you going to use, and are you going to use it properly, right? Because if you got corn like this and you got the A and the C, you got a variety that's darker, that might actually lead you in the wrong direction. So you got different varieties in there that may be an effect that you have to be aware of. If I'm using red edge, I'm not going to show that way. It's just a different light spectrum. So using the right tool at the right time is extremely important.
Mm-hmm. I think often people think these technologies are replacing work that's happening. But in this example, and as you showed us in the previous slide with the cycle, the technologies are complementing the work and the things that you or the farmer are already doing, going out into the field physically, walking the field, taking soil samples, which literally means that you take a sample of soil and you analyze it. And if this is a 150-acre field, you're taking a lot of soil samples to be able to understand what the soil actually looks like in each of these field sections, so that you can, as you said, take that information and put it with what you know about the genetic makeup of that crop variety and the performance historically in that field of a crop.
Yes, the data isn't replacing agronomy by any means. It just helps us to make decisions. Just look at it this way. Today we have computers. If you go back 30 years, we didn't have computers. Does that mean we have less work today than we had 30 years ago? No, we just have a lot more information to help us to do a better job.
Exactly. It's different work and work where we work smart. Can you share with our audience, what is this picture then looking at?
Well, that's a very good example. When you walk into the field with the map, you see the little squares there with the picture beside it. Would zoom into this a little bit, you can see on the right hand corner on the top, the corn is very short, less population. Where on the left you got high corn, goes up to your belly pretty well, and at the bottom again a total different crop in the same field. But me as a crop scout going into the field, I don't know where to walk in the field. I have no idea where is the worst and worst best. The worst in the red picture before doesn't necessarily mean all the red areas are the same. They could be something totally different. It helps me to go to the locations in the field that have more stress. All those areas are not necessarily the same thing, but at least you know where to go. And the other thing too is it tells me how big that area is. If I want to do something, I'm not treating the whole field necessarily anymore.
Yeah, and I think that's what's really key for people to understand. When we see these big pieces of equipment, to see a video here with a combine, we have to understand that, like you said earlier, they're not spraying the entire field with crop protection or chemicals as people think of these. They're being very targeted with where they're applying either nutrients, so it could be fertilizer and micronutrients of what specifically that crop could need in that specific area of the field, or providing crop protection. So it is a very targeted approach, hence precision agriculture.
That's right. So if you're on the video here, you see the combine. The reason why I brought this up was we're collecting information as we're harvesting, making a map out of this. And as I said before, in the early 1990s, I started to zone sample. And basically what I did is I went to specific zones in the field and sample with the soil sampler that specific zone. And then afterwards, when I went walking in the field, I know exactly that area is giving me a soil sample back that reads with those kind of nutrients. So if I'm looking at an issue with a tissue sample, it helps me afterwards to say, well, this is what's in the soil, but This is what the plant gets. What's the difference? You have to look at it very similar to when you go to the doctor, take a blood sample, you're looking at what food you were eating the last few days. Why are you not supposed to drink orange juice? Because you can throw off the sample, because that can be overwhelming in the blood sample afterwards. It shows up extreme, so it doesn't give you an average, right? So really, compared to us humans, the plant is a living organism, and we're doing the same thing there.
Yeah, excellent. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit here, and I want to talk about innovation, because today's theme is innovation and research. And one thing I always think is important for people to remember is that innovation doesn't always mean technology. And this is an example from a friend of mine's farm, Lindsay. So she's a sheep farmer, and her and her partner Chris farm by Ottawa, and they have a fairly small farm, and they were looking for more pasture land for their sheep. And not too far away, there was a solar farm. And so that operator needed a solution to keep the grass down under the solar panels. If it gets too long, it gets up into the panels, and that can cause problems. And so they actually were able to partner. And now the solar farm operator pays Chris and Lindsay to pasture their sheep under the solar panels. And they do something called rotational grazing, which simply means that they put the sheep in different sections of the field and they move them around similarly, so that the sheep are able to get the nutrients from the plants and the grasses, but they don't take too much. And at the same time, because when sheep eat and when livestock eat, they also poop. So they're also fertilizing and providing nutrients back to the pasture. So the soil is healthy, and the solar farm operator keeps his grass cut without having to hire a grass cutter, and they have a solution to pasture their sheep. It's really a win-win-win, and I think it's exciting because it's also a win for the environment. And so when you're thinking about your business, Felix, from your perspective, if there's people watching that are interested in working in precision agriculture, what advice would you give to them to be able to succeed in this field?
Well, the first advice is, and I'll start with a little information, don't get yourself overwhelmed, but know what that information means, because a yield data, as an example, is sometimes confused with, oh, it tells me what the potential of yield is in that area. Actually, no, it tells me how much nutrients I'm taking off as I'm harvesting. So that area may have been yielding a lot more, but also removed a lot more nutrients. So for the future, I'm just giving that as an example, I probably have to pay more attention to those areas. Keep good records year after year. And I mean detailed records. They're not just helping you operate and make sure that, you know, as an example, certain areas or certain fields have different needs. It also tells you what you've done in the past and what worked and what didn't work. So when you make a change from working the fields to minimum till or no till, which means run less equipment through the field, that can be potentially a positive impact, not a negative impact when you look over the whole picture. And compare information, like when you do soil sample, it's not about the soil sample this year, it's how much did it change from 1 year, 3 years ago, etc. So again, it's record keeping, but at the same time, compare that information and make something out of it. Don't start with a huge amount of information. Just take the first information that you have and analyze that properly. It's not how much information you have. It is and it isn't. But at the same time is understand the information.
Yeah, I think that's really key. I know when I worked at John Deere and working with producers that had so much information and they were trying to leverage it. And that first step of being able to understand what is the information that you have and what is it telling you is such a critical piece. And also the record keeping. I mean, most people probably don't realize that every year, every season, every spring, farmers go to the field and plant a crop. And that's like running one research cycle, right? And if we are keeping records on what we are doing in those fields and what we did differently this year versus last year, at the end of the year, we can go back and evaluate how those changes made an impact on the yields and on the farm business.
When you look at how much it changed over years, look at manure, how we deal with manure these days, and how we make more use out of those nutrients. It used to be that a manure pile was beside a hill. Today, you wouldn't do that anymore, right? Because you have the runoffs. You're actually catching the runoffs, put that to the field because there's value. I think from a change in agriculture, we have improved a huge amount over the years, making use out of things that we haven't, not just knowledge. And I think today's farming has changed. We hire more consultants and professionals to help us making those decisions. It's not just, oh, what we applied last year, we're going to apply this year again. We're actually looking at that.
And there's huge benefits to the environment as a result of doing that, right?
That's exactly it.
So if anyone is interested in reaching out to either Felix or I, our contact information is here. And just a nice safety reminder to everybody as we head into spring here, there's going to be lots of farm equipment on the roads. So please drive carefully and share the roads. Keep us all safe. Thanks so much, Felix.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Jennifer.
Well, thank you so much to both of you, Felix and Jennifer. This has been a great discussion. The discussion on drones we just had really reminds me of some of the work we're doing at the college using drones in our architectural technology program to get a lay of the land. And the geographic information system, or GIS mapping, that you're using is a big part of our environmental technology program. So it's really amazing for our students to see this technology in action. Your comment about keeping good records is basically another way of saying collect data, which really is music to my ears. And I love how you've tied together agriculture, big data, Industry 4.0, things that we've been talking about for quite a while now. What an evolution of the sector. Thanks so much.